We're going to give it a couple more minutes for people to make it on.
Hey, John, this is Tim. I'm joining.
Hi, Tim.
As you can see, I'm at an airport, so I'm going to shut my video off, put myself on mute. I'm just going to listen in.
Got it.
All right.
We're going to give it one more minute for any stragglers to come on board, and then we'll get started. All right, well, let's get started. This is the continuation of our last meeting, which was meeting 4, but we only got halfway through the things we need to get through, so that became known as meeting 4A, and this is meeting 4B. We still have a lot of stuff to go through. Good thing is it's kind of like the same drill as the last time, just the remaining areas. So with that, I'll start going through it, but I just want to open up, Tian, I know you're in an airport, but do you have any thoughts or comments you want to share with the group before we get going?
No, I don't. I mean, like you said, it's just the same exercise as last, and do those last 2 program ideas and break down a detailed description. So thank you, everybody, for joining in and adding an extra meeting to your calendar.
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate it. And like I said, we have a lot of stuff to go through. We only have an hour, so I've asked Ethan to play time cop for this. So if he pipes in every now and then, he's just trying to keep us in line. So in terms of the agenda, the goal is to once again go through those program templates and make sure they reflect the advisory panel's views in terms of the overviews, and as well create those program parameters, because those are going to be key to shape the programs, but also for the continuing homework of allowing the panelists to be able to rate the idea submissions that have come in based on fit. So that's what those parameters are going to be used for, or for considering anything else that would come into that program over time. And then in the next steps, briefly at the end, we'll talk about where we're going for the next meeting. Go to the next slide. And by the way, feel free to pipe in if you need to throughout this. I'm going to intentionally try and go through it fairly quickly and be pretty workmanlike. But once again, if something important, just stop me and we can discuss. So once again, same approach as last time. We're going through making sure that we're clear on what each one of the program areas are. Offline, we're going to be able to continue to rank those areas. And then as pre-work for meeting 5, asking the panelists to rate the idea submissions based on the level of fit with the program parameters. So that'll help us understand what's in them and what's shaping them. Once again, the intention is for the high fit idea submissions to continue up with whatever programs get prioritized by the panel to the Spark Executive Committee. So next slide. So here's what we're going to go through today, and there is one change to this that I want to let you all aware of. So last time, we talked about programs to grow and support industries, innovation, entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the talent pipeline programs. A couple things to note here. Representative Tarwater had asked to be able to kind of put tourism support kind of back on the agenda for us to at least take a look at in terms of shaping and looking at the idea submissions there. So we've kind of added that back into the set, and we can talk through that. And then the remaining 4 areas, worker training programs. We took some of the things that had been in talent pipeline that were more training oriented and focused them in on the worker training program. And then in terms of the other areas, we're going to walk through building improvements and construction, which is more kind of town square type development and things that are required to support business growth across Kansas, housing, and then water and sewer. And once again, it's going to be up to the panel to decide eventually, how it wants to prioritize focus across these areas. So just because they're here doesn't necessarily mean that this is any one of these program areas is an area that would go forward to the Spark Executive Committee. It really just depends upon what the panel's wishes is. Go ahead. So we're going to go, okay, so worker training programs. Once again, these are a little bit more placeholder slides, these ones. Eventually offline after this, as we get the input from these sessions, we'll let everyone kind of go through those summary ones and say, I think when it got summarized correctly or not. So we're not going to spend time on those. But on this one, just like the last time, the drill is, why don't everyone take a couple minutes and read through the program description and the goals, target outcomes, and think through whether things here make sense, don't make sense, should make any changes, and give you guys a couple minutes to look at it, and then let's talk it through. All right, I guess I'd open it up now for the fast readers. So who has any thoughts for improving this?
John, this is Andrew Dave. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my headset was cutting in and out, but I'll take a first stab while others are thinking and reading. I guess my first question would be the first sentence there, the attainable skills. Kind of curious about that and kind of what that really means, what we're driving for. I guess I would kind of read it or maybe offer a edit suggestion that empower workers with skills and knowledge, because I don't know that it's always just kind of hand-on technical education skills, but skills and knowledge needed to succeed. But again, I know we could wordsmith till the end of time, but the attainable sounds jumps off of me as curious. And then, and I'll just finish my thought. So, and then kind of further down in kind of the goals and targeted outcomes, or rather, I'm sorry, above that within who the eligible applicants are, workforce partners, stakeholders. I would assume educational institutions are technical colleges, universities. Maybe that's inferred to mean workforce partners, but if we're going to list some specifics there, I would probably reference educational institutions, but those are my thoughts.
It makes sense. Yeah, you probably don't want to empower people with unattainable skills. So good catches, Andrew. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot with the worker training idea. I really struggle with, we have a lot of programs out there. A lot of our higher education institutions have gotten additional funding separate from all of this funding that is really supposed to be focused on these very goals. And again, I am really challenged by creating more programs for people who simply are not available in our state. If the upskilling, I get it. I want people to have great opportunities, but if we're talking about transformative work with these dollars, if the people aren't here, they're not here. They're not here to upskill. They're not here to get into the training programs. I mean, our unemployment numbers would tell you the people are not here. So I'm challenged by this entire program being funded through this group, but obviously I'm open to others' opinions on that. It's just going to continue to be a challenge for me.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and that'll come into the prioritization on it, right? So part of this is really just shaping it the way people think makes the most sense, but it may be that the panel, decides not to prioritize this at all. So points heard. Anyone else?
I would just chime in that I think some of this can be solved with policy change instead of necessarily money through ARPA and Spark. That there are efficiencies that can be created through our regent system and community colleges and technical colleges that don't necessarily require more money. Not to mention the fact that Lana's right. There's a sizable increase in the funds that are going to our community and technical colleges, as well as grant programs that have been created in the past, 15 days that can address a lot of these things.
Yep, sure.
John,
right.
John.
Yep, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
This is Tim. I don't know if the first word of this program description, statewide training programs, I'm trying to recall, weren't there some initiatives that were very targeted, like a training facility or something, high tech training facility? Because I agree, statewide training programs, those are a lot, those are really broad, and that kind of funding probably is targeted towards, our junior colleges and things like that. I thought that some things that were very targeted towards high tech training, and I think I'd be more apt for that. For instance, if Spirit or someone had some sort of training facility that was going to train workers, to retrain workers for very high tech things, advanced manufacturing aerospace, I'd be more apt for that than statewide, if that makes sense.
So strike the word statewide. Seems like I see other people nodding when you were talking.
And Tim, to build off your thought, maybe I look at this as a statewide effort, but maybe it's just in the narrative there of training programs across the state. Accomplishes the same tone, but it's not necessarily a statewide program.
Right. Good catch, Tim. Let's, in the interest of, okay, go ahead, Lana.
Sorry, I think the further piece of that is that what this group seems to be focused on is, as long as it's private sector driven, I think we might be good with looking at that. I think public sector has gotten a lot of funds to do this work, and I'm not sure we're going to be transformative in trying to join into that melee.
Right. Got it. Let's go to the next slide, just in the interest of time. Sorry, we got And Ethan, feel free to jump in and be the time cop. Sorry, I'm old enough that I always get this vision in my head of Jean-Claude Van Damme whenever I say that. So on this slide, take a couple minutes, look at the left, look at the right. The left is really just around how to profile this in terms of impact and feasibility to the Spark Executive Committee eventually. So some of these descriptions around the things that they would be looking at. And then on the right is really the program parameters. And there are just some illustrative ones here to get people thinking. And we'll go through them. Those parameters should be, once again, whatever the panel wants. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4 totally different ones, all the same ones. You want to have your fingerprints all over that. So I'll stop talking to me about 2:15 and then we can talk it through. Anything on the left-hand side people want to change?
Nobody else wants to throw in, John, I'll just suggest on the workability, feasibility, kind of building off some of our previous conversations. I think Commerce does a great job with their programs, but I think it wouldn't be, even they would offer up and convey that they're not the totality of the workforce system. So maybe there's a way to expand that thought to be Commerce, workforce, there's federal workforce partners.
Yep.
Maybe there's workforce partners that can leverage existing grant.
Yep.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yep. Good point. I figured someone was going to go there, but yep.
Then John, I'll pick on duration and then the ongoing investment needs. That this is the never-ending prophecy, I guess, that we hope we find ourselves in. The long-term duration to upskill workers and fill blank open jobs, and then you may require ongoing funding for new programs. So, what's the need of today versus what's the need going to be in 30 years? So again, with catalytic kind of one-time investments, I think we may want to narrow it from a long-term duration to something much more specific.
Should the feasibility then go down to medium if we're going to say we really want it to be a catalytic focus?
I would support that.
Okay.
Again, I think we need to be, if we're going to do this, we need to be mindful that it's private sector driven if we're going to put money in it. If we're going to put money in it, there's no point in us putting more money in a state agency and hoping that they do something different with it than they have done with the other funding.
Well, do you want to that point, Lana, would you want to make that a program parameter on the right?
I would far prefer that this be private sector driven if we're truly trying to meet needs that the private sector has expressed and the growing private sector has expressed. I would lean towards that if we're going to do any funding in it at all.
Would anyone else be supportive of that?
I would second Lana's motion.
I wasn't coming off mute there, but I would as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Aye.
Sorry, I was never in Junior United Nations or whatever it is, so I'm not as familiar with the parliamentary stuff. All right, well, we'll add that then. Let's go through them one at a time just to make sure. First one, address workforce needs across Kansas in areas with abundance of open jobs and high growth industries of the future. How do people feel about that one? anyone not like it?
Probably wordsmithing here, but abundance. You know, if Senator Clays has one open job, he thinks that's probably an abundance of open versus some other company that may have 100 or more open jobs. So
Should we just say needs, with needs in high growth industries of the future? Got it. Good add. The next one, offer attainable skills. I can see where we may go with attainable. That will provide career longevity to workers throughout the state. Is that necessary? I mean, if you're addressing workforce need, is it kind of covered in the first one or not?
Yeah, I would agree. It's kind of self-evident.
Third one, leverage existing agencies and programs to efficiently administer, fund workforce training. Do you guys, any thoughts on that? Modify, keep as is, take out?
I think we need to
Yeah,
mention that with the focus being that their role is to assist the private sector in setting these up, not to create additional programs that we're going to have show up in the budget year after year after year to try to cover, because it's a public sector driven program.
Check, got it. People good with that as a modification of this one? Good. Prioritize training programs that place trained workers within Kansas to incentivize talent retention. Is that necessary? Can't hear you, Lana.
I'm not sure I understand. Prioritize training programs that place trained workers within Kansas. Does that mean we're going after already trained workers?
Yeah,
I
I'm
know.
not exactly sure. Anyone trying to retain workers? Yeah, I think that's an outcome of any of this stuff, but I don't know that that's necessarily a parameter. Right? Because I think if you do it well, it will incentivize them to stay, right?
Yeah, I really don't understand it. To place trained workers within Kansas to incentivize talent retention, that just isn't clear what that means.
Yeah. So would you think to maybe eliminate that one?
I think it'd be fine to eliminate just because I agree. I don't really understand it.
Yep. Anything on that isn't here? With, you know, we made the tweaks, we made the ad that Lana suggested about, you know, focusing it through kind of private industry. Anything else that you want to make a parameter? Great. Well, let's move on, because like I said, we got to go through a bunch of stuff, and the time cop has already spoken. So once again, not going to go through this. This is building improvements and construction. Some of the examples of here were kind of Main Street renovations, other things like that, business park development, historical site renovation. Those are idea submissions that generally fell in here, right? They may not all fit, but they kind of have fallen in here. Go to the next slide. So take a look at this one, and let's talk at 223 around any suggestions people have for improving it.
Hey, John, this is Tim here. For me, under goals and targeted outcomes, I'm assuming those dollar amounts are there just as placeholders, because what I don't want us to do is put us in a box to where a number might exceed that and we're getting a match theoretically from the private sector. And we're like, oh no, our hands are tied. And so I just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah. I think that was more there in general for thinking about how you might size it in terms of the impact, but I agree with you on that. Any other thoughts on this? Improvements? All right, going. Go to the next slide. And once again, folks will get a chance to look at those types of things, another cut after this. We do, though, really need to make sure that we get the parameters correct. So take a couple minutes till maybe 225, 226, look at the left and the right, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Suggestions on the left.
John, I think this might have been something that we discussed last meeting as well, but under the equity,
Yep.
disproportionately impacted communities. I mean, as I've kind of gone through the submissions, we've got them in probably 105 counties or at least some number close to that. So I don't know what we mean by that under the equity comment.
I think it was meant to be, it probably will impact them. Some of the projects will be in disproportionately impacted communities, but I guess how would you want to change the verbiage there? Because it should be whatever the panel wants.
Yeah, I mean, give me some time. I'd probably delete disproportionately, but give me a little bit more time to think on it.
It really could be ensure improved business infrastructure across a number of Kansas communities, right?
But put the period after Kansas.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got it.
I would agree. I think we're putting ourselves in a corner and potentially missing out on a very transformative project because we can't agree that the community that applied for it is disproportionately impacted.
Yeah.
I'm with Ryan.
We will modify. Anything else on the left?
I guess I have a question. So, and a lot of these I see in the workability feasibility, it's about just giving the money to a state agency, or a state agency is listed there as who can do this. Explain to me. So are we saying we're just going to allocate dollars and then they just do what they want with those towards some basic ideas? Or are we actually going to talk about projects as a panel?
What's going to go into this area is the high fit idea submissions that the panel decides are high fit. Will be a starting point for whatever administering agency ends up doing it. So the panel will look at those idea submissions. Once again, they're still fairly high level, but those will be the things that have been contemplated. And if there are any additional things that whatever the administering agency went forward with, it would be scored against the program parameters that the panel itself is choosing on the right.
John, to build on that thought and kind of maybe to enhance Lana's question, I've interpreted some of those as kind of just who is the reporting agency long-term, because I assume, and maybe incorrectly, that the Spark staff, your contract and the Sparks team are not going to continue on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and that the federal government, the Treasury is going to ask somebody from Kansas,
Yeah.
how did we deploy the funds? So I've kind of interpreted those when I see commerce as some state agency, some level of
Yeah.
state government is going to have to monitor wherever these dollars get allocated, that they did what they said they were going to do. Is that not accurate?
Yeah, yes, but then they would also be the ones who would need to go through kind of the final 10 yards on the procurement process, because once again, in the idea is we just get enough detail to do some of the things around that.
So I just want to be clear. So we're not making any final decisions on those dollars, except that we're going to turn them over to a state agency who is then going to use the parameters that we've identified from looking at a 30,000 foot application and maybe follow through with what we would have funded had we had that opportunity, or maybe they do something completely different. I mean, that's my question.
Yeah.
Who holds that
Yes.
state agency accountable for utilizing the funds the way this panel determines they should be utilized?
Well, once again, the final authority of what goes to them will be at the Spark Executive Committee, because they're going to get more things that they can fund, right? So
Right.
some things will go forward and some things won't. What will go forward will be the funding amounts, the description of what's in it, the program parameters, and the high fit idea submissions that went forward as well as a starting point forward, or maybe a starting and ending point. Some of them may fall out when you get into the asking the final pieces of the procurement process. Some may not. In some cases, the idea submissions may only cover part of the landscape that needs to be covered, because people just didn't put in idea submissions that covered the full concept. But yeah, they would have a lot of direction given to them for executing it.
And so if, say, the executive committee took the recommendations of this panel and said, yes, exactly what they said is what we're looking for, is there somebody to hold the agency accountable, or do the funds just go to the agency with the instructions? And is there accountability for that? Do we know that?
I think it's dependent upon how the directions get sent from the Spark Executive Committee through the State Finance Council to the agencies. I'm not an expert to really know beyond that. I'm more of a strategy person, but the intent is for the information to travel. So,
Hey, Lana, this is Tim. That's a great question. I don't know that exact answer right now, but let me go chase that. I would imagine that there's a certain level of accountability that the Spark Committee will have over the agency that's deploying the funds based on the recommendations that we give to the Spark Executive Committee and they sign off on. But let us get you a clear black and white answer on that, and we'll email it out to the group or somehow communicate that to the whole panel. Okay.
yeah,
but I would agree with you that we do need that accountability.
I appreciate that.
Just so you guys know, my expectation and Representative Tarwater's expectation is that we've identified these programmatic areas, and within those buckets, there's several submissions that we've all kind of discussed and said, yep, that's the ones we want to submit. And then we'll walk those in to the Spark Committee so that they can further challenge us to do further due diligence. And then eventually they'll sign off on it. But for me and Representative Tarwater, we want to make sure this panelist group here gives us collectively as a group, gives us actual submissions that we feel like meets these programmatic areas and can provide the catalytic impact that we're looking for.
Yep. And I've gotten a few comments from the team saying likely to be codified in SFC, State Finance Council resolution. Like I said, I'm not the expert, but I guess, anyone from the support team, if you have better understanding and more detail around it, feel free to pipe in.
Yeah, John, happy to jump in here. And I'll preface this by saying, not a lawyer, just play one on TV. So this is just my understanding of the process. But this process has been laid out in state statute that the Spark Executive Committee has to approve any of the allocations, and then the State Finance Council would also have to approve those. And so if those allocations are structured in a certain way, if whatever administering entity is selected didn't follow those parameters or whatever was approved by the State Finance Council, I believe the accountability there would be that they would be out of step with the statute that established this process in the first place.
John, in the interest of time to keep moving, I'll say that on the right side, I really like the geographic equity, the way that's kind of described. I think there's a way in the bullet before that, prioritize projects that will drive new economic development across Kansas and in new industries. I mean, getting back to that concept of our kind of advancing industries, kind of forward thinking. But I really like, and I know kind of was captured in the last discussion about the matching funds, prioritizing, not putting a hard rule to it, but prioritizing matching funds, I think makes a lot of sense. That's my thought.
Great. Awesome. Any other thoughts on the right-hand side? I appreciate the time cop aspect of that, Andrew.
On
Go ahead.
bullet one, can we delete new? I mean, that gets in whether you're already in the process or in the queue versus, day one, whenever the funds get let. Does it truly have to be a new economic development from that day forward?
Okay.
I just have a question of clarity. Building improvements and construction. I'm trying to. So I know we have one about housing coming up. I know that we. I guess what I'm questioning is this the bucket that like the really big catalytic ideas about like the grid or broadband? Would that fall in this purview?
No, broadband connectivity has its own advisory panel.
Okay.
And housing's its own thing.
And I know that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, and maybe it's not for now. I'm trying to anticipate what may fall under here, and if it's building improvements and building construction, or if those are separate issues. That
it's more kind of like community investments around building improvements, construction to support economic development.
Okay.
So town square type stuff, or anything else that could fall into that area. Anyone else have any suggestions on the right? All right, let's move on then. Housing development and rehab. Go to the next slide. So folks, take a look at this one. A couple minutes, let's come back and make sure that we're all comfortable with what's here, and if not, change it to improve it. All right, have at it. Lana, you've got to have some comments on this slide.
I certainly do. The idea of building affordable housing, I'm completely against that. In most of our communities, if we built any housing, it would free up additional affordable housing. I can tell you in my community specifically, all of the housing demand identified in my community is in the $200,000 plus owner occupied and rental level. If we built those homes, if we built the 4,000 houses that I need in those categories, it's going to free up the older inventory that can come in and take care of the moderate and low income. But to utilize land to build new units that aren't going to appraise as high, that aren't going to give as much back to the community and ad valorem and meet those new housing needs, to me makes no sense at all. We have a lot of programs that support moderate and low income housing. And truthfully, the need is to open up older inventory to meet those needs and allow.
So take the second line and just say, how would you verbalize that second line?
The supply of high quality housing in Kansas. First of all, everybody's definition of affordable is something very different, and you can't build it in today's world. You can't build affordable housing by what most people consider that to be. And if we're trying to tie these funds to I mean, when you specifically say moderate and low income, that would identify it as something that probably has funding from another state or federal source. I think these dollars need to be catalytic and need to be focused on private for-profit development that truly starts adequate housing construction across the state.
Got it. Anyone else have any? What are your thoughts on what Lana just said? Are you all in agreement?
I support that. I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but I think from the conversations we've had as a panel in prior meetings, I support that direction.
Got it.
I'll add to that and say that I agree. I know kind of Lana's argument about her region and the kind of stakeholders she's hearing from is an acute need in that part of the state. And I think that's indicative of other parts of the state as well. If it's trying to remove kind of exclusionary language, I'm definitely supportive of it. I do think there's parts of the state that do have an affordable housing need. So I would hate to kind of be exclusionary the other way and kind of tilt this solely towards an upper end housing solution. I don't know that that's what she means, but I guess I would be an advocate of removing language that excludes. Let's open up the categories as much as we can.
Got it.
Yeah, and Andrew, to add to my comment, just from what you said, it's my understanding that as from Lana and from others who have explained, it's my understanding that by doing this, we will be opening up moderate and low income housing as you increase the overall stock of housing. It's just not being too prescriptive in this that we get ourselves into a box and that we end up missing opportunities.
And so then we're going to need to kind of conform the bottom to that philosophy from the top. So got it. That makes sense. That is consistent with what the panels had talked about.
John, this is Tim. Why don't you just say supply of quality housing in Kansas? And then that up to, different parameters. Supply of quality housing in Kansas.
Okay. Got it. Awesome.
John, I may be reading more into it, but the final sentence there on program description, the eligible applicants are local governments or housing developers. Again, as I've started to churn through the 400 submissions, I think there's some unique LLCs and corporations and probably NGO type entities. And I just want to make sure those folks fall into either the local government or housing developers. So not necessarily excluding anybody that can apply.
Got it. We can make that modification. Got it. And like I said, we'll make sure that we revert this all to you guys so to make sure we captured the thoughts right. Go to the next line. I just want to make sure we don't need a meeting 4C. So take a look at this one and take a couple minutes and then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, any suggestions on the left?
John, this is Tim. Probably going to Lana's issue. You probably need to take out affordable housing stock and just say housing stock.
Got it. We'll do.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, just a reminder that we do want an answer on how it would be managed if, if the executive committee takes it on and sends the money to KHRC. I would just like to have that clarification.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more on the reference to the $25,000 per project mentioned in there? Is that illustrative or?
I believe it's illustrative. Should we just strike it though? Got it? Okay.
I probably would for now, but almost to that point, I like that third bullet on the right that kind of talks about large scale immediate. I mean, we're not going to be able to address these funds and on top of the increased funding in the state budget and what other agencies, there's a lot of, as the elected leaders on this call have described before, there's a lot of programs being discussed about housing this legislative session. And even that probably won't address all the need, but if we could prioritize what makes the biggest impact, and that might mean just for a few parts of our state, I think that's a better use of funds.
Okay. On the right, I guess just going down the line, heard kind of a, thought around the third one being important on prioritize housing development rehab projects that create more affordable housing for Kansans. I take it strike out affordable.
Yeah.
Right? The second one, focus on addressing housing shortage, in communities with economic need to attract working families.
Again, that's a
What do you-
qualifier I'm not sure I would have in there. There
Folks,
are
others agree with stripping that one out?
Stripping what specifically, John?
The second parameter?
well, I don't mind the parameter. The working families.
Okay.
That if that limits us to only wanting housing that attracts working family. I mean, we have retired folks who could move into our communities and make tremendous impacts. I struggle with putting any kind of a qualifier on what kinds of families we would want to recruit.
A little too much elaboration after economic need. Got it. Anything else? The fourth one? Anything missing? Anything anyone would change on the right in addition to the comments that we've heard? All right, going to move to the next one then. Keep going to the next slide. This is water and sewer infrastructure. So take a look at this and we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes. Any suggestions?
John, I don't remember what I had submitted under this, in prior solicitations. But I think as I read this, I'm wondering, I guess in my view, for this category, I was thinking about this sort of investment as it tied to economic development projects. I'm not saying that water and sewer infrastructure aren't connected with that, but this is one where I think that there are other available funding sources. So I like the idea if there were specific projects that were tied to some more immediate economic development opportunity where this category made sense, but that it wasn't simply a community in need of water and sewer infrastructure improvement in isolation.
So maybe something in the program description that says, with particular focus on those projects that could drive economic development.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from other panel members, but that was my take.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say, I think that makes sense as opposed to general needs in a particular community that might have aging infrastructure. If there's a a new employer, an expansion of an existing employer, some industry that requires an expansion of industry. So not only are you serving the community, but you're having the catalytic effect of enabling job creation. And in a specific instance, that would certainly make something in this category more attractive, I think.
Yep. Got it.
And I would build on that thought, and maybe Sam and Brett wouldn't agree with this, but I definitely agree with the economic development connection. But I would maybe expand that to the housing to kind of finish the thought we just had on housing. There's a housing developer that's, looking at or has been evaluating a particular community or county and getting the infrastructure in. Especially, I love the fact that it's the stormwater infrastructure. That might be the key linchpin to get the housing development going. So I would offer that up. I am curious about the last sentence there of the program description about the EPA's Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. I don't know why that ties there. I know that I don't know a lot about those programs, but I know that they have some very interesting strings and requirements. And if this is meant to match those or to amplify those, then maybe I could get behind that. But that just seems like a lot of cumbersome language to locks us up. I probably would strike that last sentence. That's just my thought.
Others agree to strike that?
To Andrew's point, I think, and to Sam's point earlier, there are a lot of other funding sources for these types of projects. I guess I hate to add words, but I think I would actually be more comfortable with this being last in or gap funding, so that projects have gone to every other source. And if there's a gap, this would be a program available for that. I don't think we should try to be first in money.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough funds to do enough catalytic projects if we're first in money.
Okay. Two things. That part around that last sentence in the program description, I think it's a kind of a requirement that needs to be in there, whether it needs to be in here or not. It sounds like it's part of the hundreds and hundreds of pages around the requirements around the set of funds. Let's go. I'm going to suggest we go to the next slide, because I think we're already getting into some really interesting things around the parameters, around what type of things you'd want to look at here. So let's let everyone kind of look at this for a couple of minutes, and then let's really come back to that right-hand side, because I just heard a couple of things around shaping the types of projects that you'd eventually want in here. All right, any comments on the left? In particular, I want to make sure that we capture those thoughts from before on the right on the parameters.
John, I think that I would maybe revert back to what I was saying earlier, where I think that there needs to be mention of the tie-in with economic development opportunities beyond just a general need within a community, which you could probably point to every community across the state. They could all use this money.
Yeah, so in the first parameter is prioritize projects that will drive new economic development across Kansas. We could just.
Yeah, I like that. Sorry, I was just looking on that.
Yeah,
I do like that. I was just looking at the left.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we can make sure that we incorporate that on the left. On the right, focus investments on facilities and municipalities currently out of compliance with federal standards. Do you think that's
John, do we feel like, John, this is Tim, on that second bullet, focus investments, do we think that's the job of this panel and the SPARK committee, or is that more of a local municipality? Senator Clays, maybe you can give us some clarity on, the budget for a water bill of some sort that's already appropriated by the states, we can get a general idea there.
Yeah.
I think Senator Clay's dropped.
Well, John, I'll add to that then, since the previous slide had the comment about the EPA requirements. Is that a requirement buried in the hundreds of pages of documents that we use ARPA funds to catch communities up that are behind on federal standards?
I don't know. I think I'm not sure. And once again, that may happen out of other pots of money. So,
Yeah, again, I just really struggle with being seen as a resource for delayed maintenance and an inattention to future planning. I struggle with that, and quite frankly, there's not enough money available. If we put all of the funds that are unallocated to this, there's not enough money to make any demonstrative change. The only thing I would really consider on water and sewer infrastructure projects would be last in funds to help shore projects up.
So it seemed to me that the two parameters here per what I've heard from you that really would sing to think about, which projects to pick were the first one and the last one. Prioritize projects with higher matching funds to ensure investments are sustainable. Would you want to add any modification to that, or does that capture it? Does that capture the last in concept, or do you want to say last in?
No, I think that.
Okay.
I think that probably covers it. I mean, maybe you put parentheses, last in funding, whatever, but.
Okay, got it.
Or gap funding, something, but yeah, I think we'd be silly to think that we could make any demonstrative change through these dollars.
Yeah. And does it really make sense to have the third one based on what you're saying? Ensure funds are distributed fairly across small and large municipalities? Because it seemed like what I'm hearing is focus this where it's going to drive economic development and where people are willing to match. So.
Yeah, and municipalities wouldn't be the right word anyway. So I would just get rid of that whole line, because obviously you're not limiting this to only municipalities across Kansas. There are certainly county governments that would also qualify.
Okay, well, let's move to the tourism one so that we can capture. And once again, this is one that we added back so that there hasn't been as much shaping around this. So let's take a look at this really quickly, and then I'm going to suggest we just jump to the parameters so that we can have a discussion around that, and then we can get to let's just talk about the parameters on this, because I think people generally get tourism. So once again, since this is the lens through which you'll look at the idea submissions here, look at what's on the right and say, what do you agree with, not agree with, what's missing, what should get stripped.
Just to remind me, John, how many applications did we have in this arena?
Was it like 11 or so?
We had 6.
Oh,
6, okay.
okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tan. What do people think on this one? So one, I think do people agree? I think it should drive tourism if this isn't tourism, but I don't know if it's all regions of Kansas.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. It's a big state. I guess it depends on how this is structured, but I can imagine you doing particular things centered around a particular region in the state that might not necessarily cause somebody to drive from one corner of the state to the other to what.
Yeah, I think it's prioritized projects that will drive have a
Yeah.
significant
Yeah, and I
impact
viewed-
on tourism, right?
Yeah, and I viewed that as more as a piece that falls under the category of equity, that there was the opportunity. There's the
Yes.
opportunity to drive increased tourism to all regions of Kansas, but that particular projects are gonna be focused
Yep.
probably by default regionally.
Mhm.
Right, which the tourism groups work together regionally, so
Yep.
it kind of just makes sense that one would assume they would be available to all.
And
Yeah, it
I don't
seems-
remember, sorry, John, I don't remember all 6 or, I remember there being a handful more and then maybe they got recategorized in other buckets, but of the tourism kind of ask projects that are in the spreadsheet, I don't remember them all being programmatic in the sense that Kansas Tourism Division or, others would manage. So I would probably, on that third bullet, I would leverage existing frameworks and agencies or entities or organizations.
Got
But
it.
the programs may not be a perfect match of what exists today and what people are proposing is what I'm getting at.
Got it. Okay. I guess the whole thing is track outcome and results of program to understand impact of strategies. I mean, is that something you look at in the selection? It's saying pick things where you can track the results? Is that what that's saying?
Yeah, I think that, or, that can be a requirement. A lot of the grants require that even
Yeah.
if you don't currently have visitor counting in place, that you would create that in order to achieve a grant. So
Got it.
I don't think we're going to be allowed to give out any funds that we're not prepared to measure. So I would say it's probably fine to have it the way it is.
Got it. Well, let me ask you folks, do you have 5 more minutes so that we can just do kind of a relative scoring exercise across these programs? We could do it in the homework, but if we could do it live, it might be helpful. Are you guys okay with 5 more minutes?
I have to jump off, but please continue on. I would love to be able to
Okay.
provide feedback after, but I have to jump off.
Great. Okay, we'll get back to you on that. Let's go to that exercise real quick. So on this exercise, you're seeing a comment from Anna on that. It's if you can allocate 100 points across these. We just want to get the general read from the group around relative importance. If you had 100 points, where would you allocate them, just to begin to see where the group thinks the level of focus should be. And then we'll show, once we get the info, we'll show live for everyone to look at kind of where it came out.
Let us know if anyone has any problems accessing the poll. I put the website and the code in the chat.
And once again, these are now defined as we define them. You define them going through the process, right? So if there are things you disagreed with, but they got switched, that's what these things are now. Support team, how many votes have you gotten?
I've gotten 3, so I think there's still 6 panelists in the meeting, so we'll wait for the last 3 to cast their votes. Just waiting for 2 more. Okay, I think everyone has voted, so let me just pull the results and then I'll share them on the next slide in 1 moment. Okay, here's the results, John.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Just really quickly, anyone have any thoughts about this? Any surprises in line with what people thought?
Not a statistics guy, but looks like there's a pretty clear delineation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The only kind of surprising thing to me on this maybe is how high housing development and rehabilitation is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I knew that it was important, but I guess I'm surprised to see it that
Yeah.
far on the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this reflects the collective view of the group, not necessarily every individual. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
John, I would say the same thing. That's a little surprising to me as well.
It'd be interesting to see how many of these, because I could have put 50 and 50, you know what I'm saying? And skewed it individually. It'd be interesting to see how many people vote, how many voted for that, or all of them, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, people could have put all their 100 points in.
Could put 100 on one thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we can also look at, for the homework, we're going to do a force rank exercise as well. So we'll get at it a few different ways. But generally, I think this is kind of directionally showing us, to the point around, there does seem to be a break between the top 4 and the next 4. I think at the very least, you can take that from this. But we'll continue with that exercise. Let me just do one last thing in the interest of time. I just really want to stress the importance now. The team is going to work on making sure that we refine those parameters and all the pieces on the programs to reflect what the group here today said. The key part of homework, once again, continue to do a little bit around this, but really it's going to be then going in and rating those idea submissions. And there are a lot of them. So depending upon how familiar you are with it, it could take a decent amount of time. All you really are going to need to do is within that program area, just for each idea submission, put an H, an M, or an L next to it for high, medium, or low. You can add comments to the extent you want to, but this is our way of trying to get from the panel itself the views in terms of, okay, not only how important is each area generally, but within those areas, which idea submissions are the ones that fit the best with what the panel thinks that area should be about. So that makes sense. That's like a really super important exercise now that links all this prioritization work that's been done and program definition work and then linking it to those idea submissions. So just wanted to make that pitch.
So John, I'm sorry, this is Tim. So you will send us another link where we can get on there and then just click on medium low. Got it.
Yes, got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Same question I had, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, because we need to refine those parameters to make sure you have the correct ones to look at when you're looking at each idea. So yeah, we will send you a new link to be able to do that. Yes. that's now, and it should now be a complete exercise. Yep.
And John, on the high, medium, low, I guess we're working with what we've got. I know some of those submissions have two or three different things in them. Some are pretty long, in their summary, and then there's a couple of them in there, maybe a handful, that it just has the agency or the group that's asking for dollars and no commentary. Should we reach out and work with you all and the Spark kind of staff team, or just take what we've got and you'll handle it after that?
I think you should take what you have and we'll handle it afterwards.
John, did you give a timeline on when you expect to have responses back from everyone?
Yeah, we'll send that out with the homework, but if you have that slide in here that has this is the support team that has the timeline. Flash it up.
Oops, which slide?
That shows the timeline of when the homework will go out and when the homework's expected back.
Oh, yes. And then here. So we'll be sending out the updated homework tomorrow morning once we update the program parameters.
And then how long are they going to have to complete it?
They'll have about a week.
Okay. Got a week. Great. Any questions before I appreciate everyone taking more time than was allocated? Awesome. Appreciate all the engagement. Discussions are awesome. So this was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.